So bad that a federal judge ruled they violated the constitutional rights of the city's black and Latino residents by a new ACLU report. But a new ACLU report revealed that the stop and frisk practices used in Chicago are actually far worse than New York's. Chicago police targeted black Chicagoans for these illegal stops far more than any other group. In addition, Chicago police stopped city residents at 4 times the rate officers did in New York, meaning the level of harassment of black residents is far greater in Chicago than it ever was in New York. From the perspective of black residents who are stopped, the ACLU of Illinois described their experience as often invasive, humiliating, and disturbing. This is the same police department that was just shown in a recent report in The Guardian to operate a CIA-style secret site called Homan Square that police used to interrogate, even beat, mostly black suspects off the books. One black man even died at the Homan Square site. Clearly, the individual rights and lives of black Chicago residents is not something police are eager to respect. The abuse of stop and frisk is a violation of individual rights, but it also poisons police and community relations, the ACLU report said. As recognized by the Department of Justice, the experience of disproportionately being subject to stop and arrest in violation of the Fourth Amendment shapes black residents' interaction with the police to the detriment of community trust and makes the job of delivering police service more dangerous and less effective. In other words, excessive use of stop and frisk does not work. Let me give a little bit of statistics. Between January 2004 and June 2012, the NYPD conducted 4.4 million stops, but just 6% resulted in arrests, 6% generated summonses. So in 88% of the 4.4 million stops, the person did nothing wrong. And while more than half of all people stopped was frisk, only 1.5% of frisks uncovered weapons. Black or Hispanics were stopped in 83% of the cases, although they make up just over half of the population. The racial optics in Chicago were even worse than in New York. According to the ACLU analysis of 250 random selected stops, black Chicago residents were subjected to 72% of all stops, yet constitute just 32% of the city's population. In addition, according to the ACLU, Chicago stops a shocking number of people. Last summer, there were more than 250 stops that did not lead to an arrest, the report said. Comparing stops to population, Chicagoans were stopped more than 4 times as often as New Yorkers at the height of the New York City stop and frisk practice. Let me repeat that. So, in Chicago, you were stopped more than 4 times as often as New Yorkers at the height of the New York City stop and frisk. The ACLU criticized the Chicago Department for failing to train, supervise, and monitor law enforcement presence in black communities for decades. It was because of the series of lawsuits filed by the ACLU of Illinois that Chicago police are required to fill out contact cards whenever they stop someone, writing down the reasons for a stop and descriptive information on the person's stop, such as race and gender. The ACLU found that in the case it reviewed, nearly half the stop, the police either gave an unlawful reason for the stop or failed to provide enough information to justify the stop. The ACLU was also disturbed that Chicago Police Department refuses to keep adequate data about its officers' stop, not requiring officers to identify stops that result in an arrest or ordinance violation. They also don't keep any data when they frisk someone. This failure to record data makes it impossible for police supervisors or the public to identify bad practices and make policy change to address them, the ACLU said. In the report, the ACLU gave examples of stops that did not rise to constitutionally, okay, I get that right.
I don't know. I can't find the article.
Required level of reasonable suspicion.
Is it constitutionally?
Constitutionally. My mistake, your error. In many of them, the cop described the suspect as loitering. In other words, listen, don't just stand there. In the eyes of Chicago police, black males standing somewhere is reasonable suspicious behavior. Just standing somewhere is reasonable. Take a closer look at specific neighborhoods. The ACLU determined that there are more stops per capita in neighborhoods like Inglewood, which is almost all black. In Inglewood, there were 266 stops per 1,000 people, while in the predominantly white district, Lincoln, Foster, there was 43. While this may be the result of a plan to address crime in these neighborhoods, we strongly question the legitimacy of this enforcement approach, the ACLU said. In Chicago, predominantly white police district near North, Town Hall, and Jefferson Park, the disparity between the black population and the percentage of stops is even starker than the citywide data. For example, although Jefferson Park African American population is just 1%, African American makes up almost 15% of all stops.
It doesn't stop. Well, I guess that does stop.
And this report is dated March 24th, 2007. I'm going to post this on my Facebook page right now. Not only in New York, but it's worse in Chicago. Plain talk, bad manners. Right?
Yeah.
But you know, this is coming to be, this is an epidemic now.
It's probably been one, but it's now just coming to the forefront.
Well, it's an epidemic, and when is it a pandemic?
Oh my God! I went through this with my students.
Yeah. You know, that's why I go to you. You would have. I know.
And I have to go into my memory banks.
What was the pandemic?
I think a pandemic is widespread, but it's limited to a certain area.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's what you're right. I think you're right. You're right. It's widespread. Mm-hmm. This is widespread, but it's not limited to New York. This is a wide-demic.
Pandemic. We could look up the definition.
But, well, listen, could we have a word like wide-demic? It's wide-demic.
We stop making up words, Anselm, please.
It's wide-demic, a wide-demic. Why can't that be? Google it and see if that's a word.
No, I'm not going to do that right now. You do that because you have two computers and all I have.
Yeah, why can't it be a wide-demic?
Why don't you just look up the difference between pandemic and epidemic?
Wide-demic.
And then if there's something that goes beyond that, because what's the demic is a suffix, right? So pandemic is cross. An epidemic, so maybe the pandemic, pan means cross, and maybe a pandemic is more bigger than an epidemic.
No.
Let's see. If pan is a cross.
Okay, a pandemic is different from an epidemic or seasonal outbreak.
Okay.
Put simply, you are actually correct. A pandemic covers a much wider geographical. So we have a pandemic.
Yes.
It's now a pandemic.
Yes. But you thought it was epidemic.
Often worldwide.
Yes.
A pandemic also affects many more people than an epidemic. An epidemic is specific to one city.
Okay. So the epidemic is the one limited and the pandemic is
across. Well, it can be a pandemic if it's in America. Because it's limited to one city, region, or country.
Okay.
While a pandemic goes much further than national borders.
Okay.
So we could say it's a pandemic.
Yeah. It's going across state borders.
It's a pandemic. So you can stand up and say, the problem is so bad now that it's past academic.
Oh, you're going to have some new epidemic.
It passed epidemic proportions. It's now a pandemic.
Why you should see him.
Yeah. I gotta you gotta splashie, you gotta make it look like, and you gotta like pause, and then you say, it's not just now an epidemic. It's a pandemic. You gotta,
Oh, my goodness.
you ever have like
Save us.
people waiting for you to say something? It's like, it's not just an epidemic. And you look around, it's a pandemic.
It's a pandemic proportions.
Right. Just when people are not expecting you.
Like, ooh, that was just so deep.
But this is pretty bad. This is bad. This is really bad. This is bad.
Yeah, man.
I mean, we thought it was bad in New York.
Well, I mean, look, what do you think, caused Ferguson?
Mm.
So, people get tired. People get tired of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wonder why, people break out in little rebellions all over the place.
Mm.
Atlanta Black Star is begging for money. I wish I had money to give them. Just for $10 a month, you can get all the news you want.
Who's that?
Atlanta Black Star.
It's pretty good. Pretty good.
Sure, it's cool, but black leaders accept the apology of the SAE.
Oh my
frat
God, that's a
member.
good one. I have that one too.
Okay, let me try to read this one.
Yeah.
So as you remember, the SAE frat member, we don't want no niggas. We'll never be a part of SAE. One day I was looking at who are famous SAE people.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were Southern people, and some of them were actually Congress people. So I was interested to see if anybody would bring that part up. Mm-hmm. This week is apparently the Black American Forgiveness Tour, featuring black folks forgiving white people for despicable acts committed in the name of ugliness and racism. The latest is the case of Levi Pettit, one of the leaders of the University of Oklahoma's fraternity members, recorded participating in a gusty rendition of a racist chant about the fraternity's pride and that it will never have a blank member. Pettit was expelled from Oklahoma, and the Sigma Alpha Epsilon chapter was shut down. But Pettit made a public spectacle of his apparent contrition, stepping before microphones yesterday in Oklahoma City to tell the world how deeply sorry he was. This just came a few days after Monet Davis asked Bloomberg University to reinstate baseball player Joey Castleberry after he got kicked off the baseball team for calling her a slut in the tweet. The university refused to reinstate him. And of course, there's a rapper, actor, Common, who painfully offered that racism could be ended if black people just could forget about the past and extend a hand in love to white people. Wow, he said that?
Yeah,
I never read that article.
And I got another one about him too as well.
Hold on, let me finish this one. This is quick.
Yeah.
While some black people were moved by these examples of the big forgiving hearts that many black people possess, others noted that apologies are too easy, too motivated by self-interest. It appears that centuries of living in the middle of racial terrorism has trained African Americans to quickly accept any gestures toward apology or contrition on the part of whites because they seem to come so rarely. In Oklahoma, Pettit stood by himself in front of a row of his black elders ready to lend moral support. I am deeply sorry, Pettit told supporters. I'm so sorry for all the pain I caused. Although I don't deserve it, I want to ask for your forgiveness. I will be deeply sorry and deeply ashamed for what I have done for the rest of my life, he said. He said the incident, which featured him and his frat brother singing a chant that they had obviously sung enough to memorize, was a tragic failure with far-reaching consequences. He said he'll spend the rest of his life trying to make amends for the chant. Pettit said the meeting with the members of the black community allowed him to fully understand the hurtful nature of his past words. I knew they were wrong, but I never knew how wrong or why they were wrong, and the people I've met have opened my eyes. State Senator Anastasia Pittman said she and other black community leaders that met with him accepted the apology. So she's accepting this on behalf of all of us. We have heard that the sentiments of Levi Pettit and his family, and we want to receive those sentiments. Isaac Hill, president of the OU Black Student Association, also accepted the sincere apology. I hope we can use this as a teachable moment. Oh my goodness.
So you want to hear what